Alright, welcome boys to this short presentation on looking at the area of study extended response for the in-class essay that you've developed today. Of course, the area of study is discovery and the prescribed text we're looking at is the motorcycle diaries. With this extended response question, as in any extended response question for the HSC, the first thing you need to do is look at the stimulus if there is stimulus provided. As you can see here, discovery can be confronting, painful, and at times empowering. I've highlighted those three terms there in terms of looking at what is confronting about this particular aspect of discovery, where is there a painful aspect to it, and how can experiences of discovery also be empowering for individuals. One of the things to remember here too is discovery, as we've outlined any number of times, is a large concept. So what you need to do in breaking down your approach to discovery is you need to focus on specific aspects of discovery in order to develop that conceptual framework more broadly to show and illustrate to your reader exactly how you see this discovery represented within the text. Further on it says, of course, in your response you are required to make close reference to your prescribed text and at least one other text of your own choosing. A reminder that you are advised to prepare two related texts as it is within the board's scope to ask for you in an HSC paper texts of your own choosing or to nominate two related texts as being required. So there are two elements to the question there. Firstly, the response to breaking down the stimulus, and secondly, there a focus on looking at the way in which you are making close reference to your prescribed text and one other related text. In relation to this question specifically, I've gone back to the rubric here and I've drawn out a couple of points that may be helpful to you in looking at, okay, how do I then structure my topic sentences? It's all well and good to talk about discovery as one large idea, but as I said previously, looking at discovery as a conceptual framework. So an idea that has so many different parts to it that you're able to break it open and show very, very specific sides of what discovery could look like. So as I've said here in this first point, discoveries can be fresh and intensely meaningful in ways that may be emotional, creative, intellectual, physical, and spiritual. Again, they are confronting and provocative, and that's that quote down there, confronting, that comes directly from the rubric for discovery. Discoveries and discovering can offer new understandings and renewed perceptions of ourselves and others. I think in coming back to looking at how you approach the extended response question, there's an avenue here for looking at any of these particular statements that are drawn from the rubric as potential topic sentences. And in looking at preparing your response, you need to show that you have a scope for understanding the rubric in its entirety. And again, honing in on key points. All the questions will come directly from the rubric. There will be no surprises. Familiarity with that rubric is essential. The third point there, an individual's discoveries and their process of discovering can vary according to personal, cultural, historical, and social context and values. And that's very significant in looking at the motorcycle diaries because you have an avenue for putting a face to certainly the cultural, historical, and social context. There's a very, very rich layering which we've been considering in the text. Lastly, to consider the ways composers may invite them, being you, to experience discovery through their text and explore how the process of discovering is represented using a variety of language modes, forms, and features. Be conscious of this too because reader response is critical for where an advanced student would be pitching themselves. The text is transformative in terms of influencing and impacting the perceptions and the perspectives of responders, that is you, the audience. So that last point I've included there is something very significant because an advanced response will be differentiated along those lines because the process of discovering for you will be influenced by what you have uncovered and experienced in the text, and that connects to those three previous points. I'd be very conscious about looking at trying to include that in your answer somewhere. In looking specifically at the question that you have attempted today in class, the stronger responses will have the following aspects to them, and I'll leave those there for you to have a look at. All I would talk to is particularly point 3, which looks at the idea of insightful analysis with specific reference to their own, being your own ideas, which will reinforce with supportive textual detail. Again, the HSC is going to reward you and the marker is going to reward you for the way in which you are able to draw detail from the text to address the specific elements of the question. Do not fall into the trap, therefore, of seeking to have a prepared essay that will magically answer all questions. It is advised to have prepared material, and I would advise having prepared paragraphs and topic sentences that are drawn from the rubric that then have supporting textual detail. But as I've said in that last point there, your content included in the response you've prepared today from prescribed text and related text was aptly chosen and accurate in its representation to the question. And that again is very, very critical when looking at how does your content match that question. Weaker responses are characterised by the following, and I'll leave that there for you to have a little bit of a look at in terms of what to avoid. And particularly, I'll go down to the second last point there. Reference to related text was surface level at best with little contextualisation. You need to outline, obviously, thematically, how your related text connects in with your prescribed text. That is critical when looking at the way in which your texts are linked. Your texts are not linked through identical characters or identical context necessarily. Your texts are linked through the aspect of discovery you are exploring. That is the thematic link that must support both of your texts. I've included here a sample introduction to the essay question that you have attempted today. I invite you to have a little bit of a read through this particular introduction to have a look at the way in which the student firstly introduces his thesis point. He addresses the question immediately and succinctly in the first sentence, and then he goes on to start to introduce the two texts that will be considered, and that is in the introduction part 2 here. Please take a moment to have a look at that. Lastly, the criteria. I've only put the A and B range here because I think that is the significant part of the rubric for what we are looking to do. Have a look at where a response is then awarded marks based on this criteria. There's a lot of questions, particularly at the advanced level, about the movement between a B and an A. Obviously, we're all pitching for an A range response, but we need to be very conscious too of looking at what differentiates the two. And it's largely to do with the whole idea of discusses skillfully here all aspects presented in the statement. And again, that's drawing directly on the stimulus statement that you've been presented with and deconstructing that. And secondly, the skillful response with well-chosen detailed textual references from the prescribed text and related text. Again, in looking at how you would put this together, a reminder that the board would recommend that you look at doing 60% of your essay on your prescribed text, which of course is the common content for other students in the state who have chosen a particular text, and then 40% on your related text. Some places, some schools would advocate 50-50. I would say that that does injustice to your prescribed text. You want the greatest opportunity to show your reader that you are very well versed in what the requirements of the prescribed text are. To spend too much time outlining your related text would be to lose an opportunity. Lastly, on this point, I would say when we look at the B range there, that whole idea of discussing effectively. Now, again, in discussing effectively here, you're able to draw together obviously the prescribed text and the text of your own choosing, but it misses that deep level of analysis and engagement with the question. One of the things that I would advocate for here is, if you're unfamiliar with particular words or terminology in terms of spelling, do not include them. If you include spelling or grammar that is inaccurate and consistent throughout your work, that will be something that hinders, obviously, point 3, composes an effective response using language appropriate to audience purpose and context. You cannot move into the A range if your response is littered with inaccurate spelling or sloppy grammar. So please be aware of that. I hope you found this video informative, and good luck with planning your essays for the assessment task.